Censorship and privacy belong together. They're both examples of social ignorance arrangements that perpetrators believe are beneficial, social, and legal conditions favoring the one also favor the other. Concerns about privacy and censorship regarding the Internet have been debated for more than a decade. Almost all of these concerns are about who should have access to what information, about whom, and whether regulation of such access is warranted or even feasible. Attempts to censor Internet materials have largely been futile. In Australia, where I live, efforts to draft legislation requiring Internet service providers to filter content were debated for several years before finally being abandoned late in 2012. Instead, some providers have voluntarily undertaken Internet filtering, for example, blocking access to child abuse websites. And then there are attempts to guard copyright and access to other proprietary data, such as the American Netflix attempts to block access to its services from outside the USA. Indeed, the net has undermined censorship powers that were effective for earlier mass communications media such as television. For example, censorship authorities in Australia's state of Victoria attempted to prevent its residents from watching Underbelly, a TV series devoted to gangland wars centered in Melbourne. The concern was that viewing it could prejudice criminal trials in progress at the time. They discovered to their chagrin that pirated versions of the program could be easily downloaded from various sources on the net. How about privacy? On several occasions, Facebook has been taken to task over privacy issues, and not unreasonably, although both Facebook and its users have contributed to those problems. On the user's side, anyone can be tagged in a personally invasive or offensive photo, and therefore Facebook can remove the photo. It may already have been widely distributed or shared. Conventional law does not protect people who are captured by a photograph in the public domain because that doesn't constitute an invasion of privacy. On Facebook's part, in 2007, the Beacon program was launched whereby user rental records were released in public. Many people regarded this as a breach of privacy, and a lawsuit ensued, resulting in the shutdown of Beacon. And then there was Kate's party. Unbeknown to Kate Miller, an invitation to a party at her apartment was sent out on Facebook in April 2010. After prankster David Thorne posted the link on Twitter, people started registering. After just one night, when it was taken down by Facebook, 60,000 people had said they were coming, with a further 180,000 unconfirmed invitees. According to Thorne, this hoax was motivated by a desire to point out problems with privacy on Facebook and Twitter. A cluster of concerns boils down to a dual-use dilemma of the kind I described in IGNO 101X. A dual-use dilemma is where the same technology can be used for great benefit, but also for great harm. The same characteristics of the net that defeat secrecy or censorship and democratize self-expression can also be used to invade privacy, steal identities, and pirate intellectual property or copyright material. For example, cookies are a common concern in the field of privacy, especially tracking cookies. Although most website developers use cookies for legitimate technical purposes, potential for abuse is there. General concerns regarding Internet user privacy have become sufficient for a UN agency to issue a report on the dangers of identity fraud. The chief dividing line debates about privacy and censorship is whether privacy is an absolute right or a negotiable privilege. Security expert Bruce Schneier's 2006 essay on privacy weighs in on the side of privacy as a right. He points out that anti-privacy arguments, such as if you're doing nothing wrong, you have nothing to hide, assume that privacy is in the service of concealing wrongs. But lovemaking, diary-keeping, therapy sessions, and intimate conversations are not examples of wrongdoings, and they indicate that privacy satisfies needs that have nothing to do with concealing wrongdoings. Contrast this view with Google CEO Eric Schmidt's vision of the future, in which children change their names at adulthood to escape embarrassing online dossiers of the kind compiled by Google. In a 2010 interview with him, Wall Street Journal columnist Holman Jenkins Jr. recorded Mr. Schmidt predicting, apparently seriously, that every young person one day will be entitled automatically to change his or her name on reaching adulthood in order to disown youthful hijinks stored on their friends' social media sites. Mr. Schmidt goes on to opine that regulation of privacy isn't needed because users will abandon Google if it does anything creepy with their personal information. Back to Wall Street Journal columnist Jenkins' interview with Google CEO, Mr. Schmidt is surely right, though, that the questions go far beyond Google. I don't believe society understands what happens when everything is available, knowable, and recorded by everyone all the time, he says. This goes to the heart of the matter, and Joe and Jane Public aren't the only ones who don't understand this. Theories and research about human communication have largely been hobbled by a default assumption that communication or misunderstanding is aberrant and should be eliminated. For example, the overwhelming emphasis is on studying how to detect deception rather than investigating how it is constituted and the important roles it plays in social interaction. Likewise, the literature on miscommunication is redolent in negative metaphors with mechanistic terms like breakdowns, disrepair, and distortion, critical theoretic terms such as disadvantage, denial, and oppression. In the human relations school, unshared and closed communications carry with them moral opprobrium. So these perspectives are blind to the benefits of unshared communication, such as privacy. Some experts from other domains concur. Steve Rambam famously declares that privacy is dead, get over it. David Brin claims in his rebuttal to a critique of his book, The Transparent Society, that we already live in an openness experiment and have for 200 years. The implicit inference from all this is that if only we communicated fully and honestly with one another, all would go well. Really? Let's cut to the chase. Imagine that all of us, zap, are suddenly granted telepathy. Each of us has instant access to the innermost thoughts and feelings of our nearest and dearest, our bosses, subordinates, friends, neighbors, acquaintances, and perfect strangers. The ideal of noise-free, transparent, totally honest communication finally is achieved. Forget the internet. Now there really is no such thing as privacy anymore. What would the consequences be? In the short term, cataclysmic. Many personal relationships, organizations, governments, and international relations would fall apart. There would be some pleasant surprises, yes, but I claim there would be many more negative ones for two reasons. First, we have nearly universal tendency to self-bolster by deluding ourselves about how positively others regard us. Second, many of us would be outraged at finding out how extensively we've been deceived by others, not just those with power over us, but also our family, friends, and allies. Look at who the American governmental spokespeople tried to forewarn and preempt about the WikiLeaks release. It wasn't their enemies, it was their friends. What about the longer term? With the masks torn off and the same information about everyone's thoughts available to everyone, would we all be on an equal footing? As Schneier pointed out in his 2008 critique of David Brin's book, those who could hang on to positions of power would find their power greatly enhanced. Knowledge may be power, but it's a greater power for those with more resources to exploit it. It would be child's play to detect any heretic failing to toe the party or corporate line. And the kind of targeted marketing ensuing from this would make today's cookie tracking efforts look like the fumbling in the dark that they are. In all but the most benign social settings, there would be no such thing as free thinking. Yes, censorship and secrecy would perish, but so would privacy and therefore the refuge so poignantly captured by Die Gedanken sind frei. Thoughts are free. The end result would certainly not be universal freedom of thought or expression. Basic kinds of social interaction would be obliterated and there would be massive cultural upheavals. Lying would become impossible, but so would politeness, tact, and civility. These all rely on potentially phrase-threatening utterances being softened, distorted, ambiguated, or simply unsaid. Live pretense, play acting, or role-playing of any kind also would be impossible. So would most managerial methods. The doctor's bedside manner, or nearly any professional's mien would become untenable. There would be no personas anymore, only personalities. I said earlier that privacy and censorship belong together. As long as we want one, we'll have to live with the other, and I leave it to you to decide which is one and the other. The question of who should know what about or and about whom is a vexing question, and so it should be for anybody with a reasonably sophisticated understanding of the issues involved. And who should settle this question is an even more vexed question. I've raised only a few of the trade-offs and dilemmas here. The fact that the internet developments have raised some debate about these issues is welcome. But frankly, those debates have barely scratched the surface, and that goes for this lecture. Let's hope the debates continue. We need them.